Welcome back to It's Kind of a Big Deal. I'm Jenna Horton and this is Olivia Bondi. Today we're recording episode 15.
What are we talking about?
Well, I love love.
We know, we say this every episode.
And so we're talking about money and relationships.
Yeah, and like kind of the natural progression of money in relationships.
Yeah.
Jenna and I were discussing like when you get into a relationship, how soon is too soon to talk about money?
Yeah.
And this is what I remembered on the way in, which is so funny. When Aaron and I first started dating, it was like COVID era, so I was like first couple dates, I was like at his house, and he has this little like office room, like his work office was off of his main living room area there, and I went in there to change because we had like some friends over, and all of his paychecks for the whole year were sitting.
Like, what's that YTD?
Yeah, I'm like. Oh, okay.
We'll book a second date.
Yeah, so we didn't need to talk about money.
Okay.
But yeah, like I think that you are someone that's more money talk oriented from the get-go than I am.
And I'm also like I'm just like an out there type of person in the sense that like if I have a question, I'm gonna ask. If I want to know, I'm gonna say it. If I have something to say, you're gonna know it.
You went to the Sting game last night and we're asking people about how they manage their money.
So yes, I went to the Sting game last night with two other couples, and like they're new friends to me. Like we started hanging out probably September, so maybe like 5 months. I don't know these people well. Sitting with the girls and I'm like, hey, I record this podcast, and
Intrusive.
Yeah, it is intrusive, but I'm like, you know what? I'm very sorry. Not actually sorry. I'm gonna ask these questions. Like,
yeah, I'm like researching. I'm creating content for the pod.
And people are open to talk about it when you lead with that. If I'm just like,
Yes.
how do you manage your money? They'll probably be a little standoffish.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were open to it. So I think that I just am very forward with these things. So for me, on a first date even, or before, like, I don't know when, pretty early on, I think you should be talking about money in a relationship, if it's important to you.
Yeah, and like we talk about money in so many of our friendships. I went out for lunch the other day with one of my friends who's like struggled with money in the past, and I was like, how are you making out with your money? Right. She's in a relationship now. She's like, oh great, he paid off all my debts.
No.
She's like, and then I racked it up again. I was like,
come on.
Yeah, but we're gonna talk about that later on, and like kind of managing, helping your partner through debt. I was listening to a financial podcast that I listened to, and it was talking about how when people get together, if they recognize right off the bat that there is a difference in how they manage their money, like 90% of the time it actually doesn't cause them to end the relationship.
Wow.
But it will come up obviously down the road. So it's funny how like we can look past all of these things and you might see these red flags, but you're like, oh, like, you know, we'll kind of deal with it at a later date.
Yeah,
but
just aware.
We also know statistically that so many marriages specifically end because of relationships and money.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of where we want to educate everybody now, is like having these conversations and communicating. And like you said, if it's not the same page, that's okay. But starting the conversation as soon as you can so that you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, and moving forward.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you had a partner in the past that wasn't great with money, that can definitely impact how you move forward into a relationship.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think that since Aaron and I have got together, he's gotten way better with his money.
Which is concerning.
I've maybe got worse.
Okay, yeah, probably. Or more lax. Like, I think
more lax. But yeah, like I think that he used to spend so much money, and now like I have way more packages that arrive than him.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Just popping off with the packages. Yeah.
So I like to think that I like positively influenced him, but I also think like when you're getting into a relationship, a lot of times you naturally spend less money.
Yes.
Think about how much money you spent in your single year. Like think about that. Like you're like popping off.
Stupid things too. Yeah. And like you're just a little bit more unhinged, I think, and like you care a little bit less about that stuff. Like you're not grounded.
Yep.
So that is, I guess dating can be expensive when you're going out to eat and like, or the movies or different activities when you're newly dating someone.
Yep.
But that would be shared with the person.
Our friend the other day, he was like talking about going on a date with this girl, and he was like hemming and hawing about it. And we were like, just take her out to dinner. Like, what do you have to lose? And he was like, I have to drive to London and probably spend $200. And we were like, true.
Yeah.
Whereas like normally as a woman, when you go on a date with someone, like, it's free. You don't have anything to lose.
Yeah. I never really thought about it. Like,
I
that's
never considered that for a
actually an
man.
investment. Like, probably going to be $300 a night to take a girl on a date. You don't know if it's going to go well.
I think he initially said like $60 and to drive to London, and I was like,
Where are you going? Are you going to Harvey's?
Yeah,
Like,
2 for $8 burgers.
That's nuts.
Oh, that's great. And then I think there's also like as you kind of move through dating, obviously the next step then would be like moving in together and navigating that, especially later in life when we have a lot of people that are coming together later in life.
Yeah.
Like high school sweethearts, my sister and her husband, they moved through all of the natural changes together.
Yes, and they grew their wealth together, their careers together, and so when they bought their house together, it was all in together.
Yeah. And now you have like all of these relationships, whether it's like a second relationship or a second marriage, or just people are naturally getting together later in life, where you do have differing assets that are coming together and navigating.
It gets way more complicated.
It's so complicated.
Yeah, and we're seeing that in so many of our friends in their lives. Like, it's really getting complicated.
And we see that all the time with our clients too.
Yes.
Right?
Like coming and going, changing. Like it's very
adding people on title.
Right, taking them off.
Title. I get that call like once a week. They're like, so this is like a really like, you know, like this is going to be a lot to unpack. I'm like, lay it on me. Like,
like we're used
you're
to
going
it.
through a separation? Yep. Okay, you need a letter of opinion for this? Yep, no worries. I got it.
Exactly.
Do you want it high? You want it low?
Right. Yes, let me know.
So that is difficult to manage. Something that I struggle with actively is like, Aaron and I both owned our own homes when we got together. Moving into his house was like never really an option because it was pretty small. And we have so many pets that like it would have been a nightmare in that small of a home. So naturally he was moving in with me. But then you run into this weird dynamic where I'm not adding him on title.
No.
It's not his home. He's renting out his house for $2,300 a month.
Right.
So he's making a good profit, but there is this weird like stigma around him paying me rent.
Yes.
Like I've heard that from actually multiple of my boyfriends in the past that lived in my house. They're like, you're not going to profit off me.
But they're not going to live for free.
Yeah.
Like, that's not fair either.
Like, I've ran into this time and time again. I've had 3 live-in boyfriends. All 3 of them lived in my home.
Right.
And none of them wanted to pay rent.
What? I think we're dating the wrong guys, clearly.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So then what's the solution to that? I think having conversations, which you were obviously doing.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to think, like, I don't know.
How to navigate that. So originally, before he rented out his house, I was like, we will... So he bought his house like long ago, probably like 2016. There's the mortgage payment's like probably like $700 a month.
So he's
property taxes. He's profiting a lot. My proposition was that we split his profits. Okay. So let's say he's profiting even half that. Let's say he's profiting $1,400.
Right. Then the rent to you is $700.
Yeah.
Right. But you're just trying to avoid the word rent. I think that it's fair to want to avoid the word rent because as much as his name isn't on title, I think that you want him to feel at home in your home. Because it's always going to be a weird separation if not.
And that's the other part of it is like it is our home. And you see that all the time in our career that when people move into a home, the woman or whoever the partner was that moved in feels the need to like buy a new home because it's not their home.
Absolutely.
Which is like an expensive thing to go through to give someone, it's great for us,
yeah.
but it's an expensive thing to go through to give someone that feeling and title. And I think that you can achieve that in a lot of other ways.
Just through communication.
Yeah. So like Aaron's lived with me for 3 years now. We've communicated to the moon and back about it. And we've never, ever, ever been able to reach something that worked for both of us.
Okay.
In addition to that, we, like when you run into renovations or fixing things at the house.
Who pays for that?
Who pays for that? I pay for it because it's my house. And he's like, if the furnace broke at one of our rental properties, who would pay for it?
Yeah.
If it's his rental property, he pays for it. So I'm like, that's fair.
Okay.
But we're building our life together.
Yeah, like you're engaged now.
Yes, and our home that we live in now will be our matrimonial home.
Right. Which then he will be entitled to 50% of it.
Yes, except we will have a prenup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's like, we're going to have a lawyer on next week on kind of navigating that. Even I was talking to his mom about that the other day, and I was like, if this is something that you told me, which is so true.
Yes. With prenups, if you don't have a prenup in place, if you can't communicate with your partner and get something in writing, then the government has one in place for you.
Right. So it's not like you're planning for a divorce. Like, I think it has this, like, once again, stigma attached to it that, like, you're planning to get separated. But it's like, I would rather have these conversations in advance when things are good.
Yeah, when you're happy.
When you're happy about how we want to divide our assets in the event that something, doesn't work out. And Aaron's like, I never want to get divorced. I'm like, me either, but I never would want to feel like I need to stay with someone.
Because of that.
Because of that.
Exactly.
Right? Whereas if we had it predetermined, like, worst case scenario, I would want to feel like we have the steps in place for either one of us to not be on their butt.
Yes.
If
yeah, exactly. There's so many positives to that, I think.
Yeah, and protecting, like, we have both worked very, very hard. It's not like we're like one person is up here and one person's down here and this person's being protected. We've both worked very hard to get where we are, and we want to protect those assets. What we have coming into our relationship, should we decide to sever, we want those things to be still ours, and anything that we build together as a married couple should rightfully be joint.
Yes, I agree. I think that's perfect.
Yeah,
I think that is an interesting point, and we'll get into this more next week as well. But it's easier to have these conversations when you are on level ground, when you guys have both built a very large asset base ahead of time, and then you're coming together, and you're at the same place. Whereas if there was a big difference, it's harder to have a conversation about a prenup or a cohab because it's feeling like someone's lesser than the other. And that's tough.
Yeah, and it's not about that.
So that makes sense. For myself, when Matt and I moved in together, there was a lot of communication. We both came from past relationships, and we had our own feelings about money. And so I was living with Maddie, so I didn't have a house. I had already sold my house, which was good. He had already sold his house, and so he was just renting as well. It's a lot easier for us to then move in together because we bought a new place. Well, I guess I should say I bought a new place, and then the same thing came up. Luckily, he didn't have any of that stigma or any of those feelings around rent or being a tenant. Like, we joked about it a lot, actually. So that was kind of nice and light and easy. And then for us, we just decided everything was going to be split in half. So
right down the middle.
Right down the middle. Yeah, mortgage, utilities, property taxes, home insurance, everything is just split right down the middle, goes into a joint account, and we both contribute the same amount, and all the bills come out of there.
What a beautiful way to run things.
So simple.
I love it.
Yes.
But you get rent.
Yes, it's rent.
But is your rent half of the mortgage?
Yes, half of everything.
Okay, so everything is split down the middle.
Yes,
50-50.
50-50, yes.
Well, and that's the tricky part too. Like, in my home, since I don't have a mortgage, that's another layer of, like,
you're still entitled to a certain amount of money.
Yeah, like Aaron's like, I'm like, okay, he's like, okay, tell me what it costs to live here in a month. I add up our gas, our hydro, our blah, 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 all of this stuff. And we split that in half, but that doesn't take into account the fact that I worked my butt off
to pay that down.
To pay that house off. And then so then we were like, let's move. We even looked at moving. We're like, okay, let's move and buy a house that is ours. Once again, I'm not taking
the equity that you built.
equity and splitting the house down the middle. So then that didn't solve our solution. But I have an update.
Okay.
So 2 days ago, Aaron said to me, after we had talked about planning this episode, I went home and I was like, we're getting married. Like, we need to sort this out.
Right.
This is the only thing outside of the restaurant that we fight about. So, like, we need to get this sorted and get on the same playing field, and then we don't have to talk about it ever again.
Yeah, it's just done.
It's done. So
once you set it up.
He agreed that he is going to pay the gas bill and the hydro bill, and he always has paid for the groceries.
Okay.
So those are the 3 things that he's going to pay for. I'm super happy with that because then I'm paying for water, internet,
taxes,
home insurance, and the mortgage.
Right.
That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That I already paid for.
Yeah. I think that seems
we're thrilled about that.
Wow.
I had him send me, like, his void check, and I went on and hooked both of these things up. I sent him a yearly summary of what it cost for the past year, and done.
That's amazing.
I'm like, this is what you can expect.
Wow.
And I'm hopeful that he will be more conscious. I'm hoping he doesn't turn into like the dad that like shuts the lights off all behind you.
That's how
But
I
I'm
am.
hoping that he will be more conscious now about these things when he like sees me screaming about the hydro bill.
Yes.
When he leaves the heater on in the garage
with the door open.
with the door open.
Right.
When that comes out of his pocket.
Poor Aaron is
I'm excited.
always being bullied on our podcast.
I know.
We love you, Aaron.
We love you, but he's just an easy culprit.
Yeah.
And this is the other layer of that is Aaron works hard for me. Like he works to the bone.
Like putting in some manual
putting in
labor.
the hours. He was at Watson last week, and the man in the lumberyard was like, "Oh, you work for Olivia Bondi," and he was like, "Yeah, full time."
No,
I forget that he asked another question like about me or something, and Aaron was like, "No, I'm marrying her, but I do work for her full time." Poor thing.
Oh my god.
So that's another thing that he was always like battling me with, right? Is like, since I've moved here, you've all heard him say it, I've added $500,000 in equity to your home by building that garage and this and that, and I rebuilt this house and this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to
that conversation's just done.
It's done.
Yeah.
And we're going into our marriage. We're going to get our prenup done.
Yeah.
We're going to get everything, financial statements as to where we're at right now coming into the marriage, and just have some open conversations about what things will look like going forward. Mm-hmm. In terms of financial planning as well. In terms of like, I went to a financial planner, and he was like, do you and Aaron want to have like joint bank accounts? Which we'll talk about now.
Yeah.
Growing up, my parents had separate bank accounts. They still to this day have separate bank accounts.
Okay.
What about your parents?
No. They had joint accounts.
They had joint accounts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So they always had joint accounts, and I have vivid memories coming home and hearing my mom, she would like go on the bank account and see that Core Dog just went out and bought chew and a case of beer, and then she was running to go get her nails done.
So it was like a battle.
Yes, like he spent $50, well I'm gonna spend $50. Like it was always back and forth with that, and it was never a healthy relationship with money growing up. So I think that also was a big driving factor for me to be so in control of my finances and communication with money.
Absolutely. And mine was the opposite. I always saw that my parents had like, my mom was always the saver and my dad was always the spender, but my dad was the breadwinner primarily. So I think it was easier for them because my mom would have probably gotten frustrated if she saw how much my dad was making, because he ran his own business, so it was always all over the map. She wouldn't even really know what he was making and probably how much he was spending.
Right.
Like he was peeling off 20s.
Right.
I pretty much bought my first house down payment with 20s from my dad for lunch, like 100%.
Like crazy. That is so interesting. So like that's a completely different take on what we're talking about, really, if you think about it, because your parents, almost a lack of communication in their relationship with money is what worked for them.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to educate people to have communication about money. It's just very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I feel like there is a lot of things that like I've definitely taken from that. Like you're super aware, like you guys have budgets, like down to the penny. I have no idea how much money Aaron spends. He has no idea how much money I spend.
Right.
I have no idea how much money's in his bank account, any of it.
Wow.
We are like blind.
Right, which is maybe okay because that part is separate.
Yeah.
As long as like your joint, like I was saying for our joint account, as long as we are both contributing the same and you know what's in that account and the bills are being paid, I guess what you do with your personal money is up to you.
Yeah, and then when we set up, like our financial advisor was like, how many kids do you want to have? Once we set up, like, let's say we're saving for our children's education, I'm okay with what he does with his money as long as our goals that we have set together are being met.
That's perfect. That's a really good way to look at it.
But then I was listening to this podcast and they were talking about how couples should have joint bank accounts. This financial guru was advising, not us.
I watched the same one. Yeah.
He was advising that you should have joint bank accounts if you're growing a life together.
Which there's something to be said about that too, but I think you have to be so on the same page.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would just see that as a place for an agreement, like a disagreement.
Yeah. And I think it changes on the season of your life too. Like now, for example, that my dad isn't working and my mom is working and my dad's owning zero, they've definitely shifted their dynamic.
Do they share an account now?
Yeah, I think my mom would pay the bills.
Yeah.
My mom would like their bills to be minimal because they also don't have a mortgage.
Right.
But my mom would pay for everything, I think, out of her account and kind of their investments, but probably just out of her account because she's the one that's still drawing an income.
Right.
And my dad, since he was self-employed, he doesn't have any type of like CPP or government pensions or anything.
Yeah.
So he's earning. So they might have even closed their my dad's bank account now.
Right. And they just
transferred
one.
the money over.
Yeah.
They probably did.
No, that makes sense.
So like depending on the season of your life, once again, like if we have kids and Aaron takes 18 months off work and he's only getting EI, perhaps then there'll be a shift as well, right?
Yeah, I think that's very good that like as life changes, you continue to open these conversations.
Yeah.
Because we just kind of celebrated that you figured this out with Aaron and we were celebrating that it was done. You don't have to fight about it anymore. But it is very true that you're going to have to reopen that at some point when life changes.
Yeah, exactly. Things
and
things
expenses change. Yeah.
And then we're going to have to be more transparent with each other. Like even when we were talking about having kids and he was like, well, like, you know, if I don't work for 18 months, you're going to have to like support me.
Right.
And I was like, well, first of all, you'll get EI.
Yeah.
But then
it's a fraction of what you make.
It's a fraction of what you make. And like I will care more about how you spend your money when you're spending our money. And that's something that I want to avoid in our marriage. So like as long as we can keep that.
Yeah, that's hard. Because then it's a very, I'm sure people struggle with this all the time of like, because then it just seems like you're in control.
And we have a really, really, really hard time with the control dynamic. And we're both extremely stubborn people.
Yeah.
So I picture us being like Heidi and Cordog. And like, oh, you spent $50? Oh, you ordered something? I'm ordering. Like I can picture that with us because we are like alpha, the two of us all the time.
Yes. That's something that Matthew and I are working on as well. And like we're doing this new thing where like it's less about money, but when I think, did we discuss this?
Yeah, when you're traveling.
Yeah, anyway, so like kind of trying to decide that there's one leader in each situation in our life because like it is hard when you have two strong personalities in a relationship and then bringing money into that, it's just next level.
Yeah, it can be detrimental.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So another thing that I want to talk about is with traveling and like just talking about how we manage our money. Like I said, we do the 50% of everything. And then that also continues into traveling.
It's into everything for you guys.
Everything for us, yes. And so after we go on a trip together, it's just kind of on whoever's credit card for the whole trip. And then we will break it down into a spreadsheet. We'll sit down on the couch, grab a
mental illness.
I will grab a glass of wine, Matt won't. But and then we just go through it all. Like we both upload our credit card statements, all of the things, and then whoever owes the other person the money, it will send it over. It's down to the penny.
That's crazy.
It works well for us. And something too, in preparation for this podcast, Matt and I have been struggling, or I guess I should say I've been struggling. We went to the grocery store together a few weeks ago, and we were at the till, we were getting groceries, it was probably like $150. And then we, for some reason, didn't use self-checkout, and we actually went to the cashier, and she was, told us the bill, and Matt's like, oh, can you split that? And like my jaw hit the floor. I was like, oh.
To the cashier.
Yeah, like I wasn't expecting him to say that because it had never happened before. To be fair,
were they able to?
Yes. She can split it right in half. I'm sure she could have split it multiple ways. I think for people if they want to do 2 payments or something.
Yeah, I guess like sometimes if you have tap, actually that's true because if I only have tap, sometimes I'll do like, I need to do like $250 tap and then $250 tap.
How much are you spending? Jeez. On groceries?
No, not necessarily at the grocery store. Yesterday at the vet, I had to do that.
Oh my God.
Both the cats had to go to the vet.
Jeez, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she did split it and that worked well.
That's wild.
It really,
but then me, stubborn, I'm like, you have 2 mouths to feed, I have 1.
So that's where this came up. So it really opened up my eyes, and then I was struggling with this. I'm like, I feel like I pay for the groceries more often, and it's just because I'll be by the grocery store or whatever. It just happens that way.
In our career, we're out and about. That's why I had to get Aaron's credit card on my phone because he was supposed to pay for the groceries, but he
doesn't buy the
has a panic attack when he goes to the grocery store, like every time. And so I was like, I'll do the groceries, but then
and then it's like
he was like, I'll pay you back, and he wouldn't, and then so now I'm just like, okay, no problem, I'll go to tap tap.
Yeah. So something now that we have come to is that we had the conversation, and it was a little bit awkward. Like I'm a very comfortable person with confrontation, but it's a weird thing to be like, you were feeding 2 mouths and I only have 1, so I don't know how this would look. And so we decided that it's going to be a 65-35, and we're going to look at it. So I'll pay 35% of the grocery bill, and he'll pay 65%. And we'll, instead of doing this so often, we've decided we'll do it quarterly.
Okay.
Like sit down once a quarter, look at our credit card statement. It's so easy to like just like take apart your credit card bill and see the grocery store, and then we'll just e-transfer then.
Well, that's a good trigger for you to also look at your budget at that time.
Yes, which I do monthly, but he would never ever. And he was like, you know what, this is actually a good time for me to look at my credit card and make sure no one's like
putting your charges on there.
Yeah, because that could just slip by.
Yeah, yeah. Or returns that you make that don't show up.
I would notice that less, I think. But yeah, that's definitely.
Gotta get on that.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be looking at your credit card.
One thing to caution as well is like, there is a balance between helping your partner if there's a difference in dynamic between one person's good with money and one person's bad with money. Like I said with my friend who her partner literally paid off her credit card.
Crazy.
I have multiple friends, both where the female has paid off the male's credit card or the male has paid off the female's credit card.
Right.
And I don't think that these people in both of the scenarios that I'm thinking of learned from that.
Right. Yes. Yes.
You've done it a million times.
Yeah, I have done it multiple times for different family members in my life, and like
every single time
they don't learn.
Rack it back up, rack it back
and
up,
it's
rack it
so
back up.
disheartening. You're just like, please, just learn how to manage your money. I want to help you.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with a spouse. I haven't been in that situation with a spouse, but it's the same whether it's your.
Do you
friend
have any comments or like advice for setting boundaries? Because like
you do it enough, and then you have to say no. Yeah. And it is so hard. Like I had to talk to my therapist about it.
Yeah.
It's that hard to say no when someone that you love is asking for money, or you see them struggling. Maybe they're not even asking, but you see them struggling with money. And especially for someone like myself, I feel that I'm educated on financial topics and I want to help with them, but they have to want to help themselves first.
Well, and that was the craziest part when I would see you like time and time again. I'm like, Jenna, you are not a stupid girl.
I know.
Like, but it's so difficult. It's so easy for me to say when I'm on the other side of it. You know what I mean? To be like, enough is enough. You have to cut them off.
Yeah.
But it can be the exact same way with a partner.
Absolutely.
Like knowing your boundaries, helping them when the time is right. I had an ex-boyfriend who when I was like super against debt and loans and scared of everything, I like paid for his vehicle. Instead of taking like a 6% loan from the bank at 0% interest. And he did pay me back. We broke up before he was done paying me back, but that's something that like
such a risk.
We had nothing in writing.
Wow.
So and then since he's gone and done that with another girlfriend, and then they broke up. So it's like,
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like there's a line between helping your partner and
hurting yourself.
Enabling them.
Yeah.
B, hurting yourself. And if you do that, it's so easy to have a guarantee written up by a lawyer. Like we had to loan someone some funds for closing a house recently that was a little bit tight, and Chelsea just did up a guarantee that we will be paid back.
Right, amazing. So if you need a referral to a lawyer, Liv and I talk to lawyers every single day. We'd be happy to help you with that, because it's better to be safe than sorry. Even if this is the person that you are in love with, you never know what's going to happen.
Right? And there's not a huge cost associated with that. Like if you're lending someone $5,000 or $10,000, it's well worth it to spend the money to go to a lawyer, have it notarized, you know, just in case something were to happen and that person didn't pay you back, you have a leg to stand on.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, absolutely.
And helping to educate people.
That's big, yes.
Right?
And so maybe it's like referring your partner to a podcast. Like if you guys are newly dating and you are wanting to get on the same page with money, maybe instead of, if it's too difficult to have these conversations, you could direct them to different financial podcasts or different Instagram channels to follow, stuff like that.
Even as simple as sitting down and saying like, let's do a budget and let's see like where you're spending your money.
Yeah, great place to start. Yeah.
Right before I had a showing, the couple was talking about money and you know, she was like, you go golfing too much, and he was like this, that, or the other thing. And I was like, start with that. Print your credit card statement. As we've said, you can sort it in a spreadsheet by vendor type.
Right.
Where is your culprit? Are you spending too much on aesthetics? Are you spending too much on golf? Are you spending too much on Tim Hortons? Are you spending too much? What is your problem? And helping them narrow that down and get systems in place is going to help them 100 times more than just blanket paying off their debt.
Absolutely.
And giving them the freedom to rack that up.
Yeah.
You cut up their credit card, they're going to get another one.
This is an interesting mention what Jamie's parents did.
Oh, this is great too.
Because
so my financial advisor asked me if I wanted to pay for my kids' education the other day, and one of my what would you call that, classmates, friends from school, her parents made her pay for her education, and when she graduated they gave it back to her in a lump sum.
Which is incredible. Like,
so great.
So smart of them.
Yeah.
So then she was invested in her education. She had to work to get through school.
Yep.
And she was wanting to succeed because it was her own financial investment.
Yeah. And then she had this huge, sum of money at the end to buy her first house.
Yeah.
Do something. Like, and I told my financial advisor that too. In addition to that, that money has an extra 4 years
to grow
and soak.
Yeah, that's
a beautiful thing. That's it for today. As we head into Valentine's Day, pour a glass of wine, make a heart-shaped pizza, and have some conversations about money.
Yeah.
I hope that you feel inspired, like I did, to go home and rip the Band-Aid off and say, like, listen, this is our last conversation we're going to have about this. It's not going to be, but let's figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.